Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the sophomore album from Camila Cabello called Romance. The popularity of Camila Cabello seems to have to do with everything except the music itself. And yeah, loaded statement, but let's run through it. The widely publicized split from Fifth Harmony, a well-managed Instagram glam presence where a lot of mainstream pop acts don't really play the game that conventionally, and the increasingly cringe-worthy relationship she's got with Shawn Mendes that seems to be trying a little too hard to be believable or likable. And the 2019 mainstream pop market, that all might be enough to stand out, even as I can't help but see a faint whiff of similar marketing that Jennifer Lopez used over 15 years ago in the early 2000s. And like that era of J-Lo, Camila Cabello's music is pretty bad, and riding way more on a faint approximation of style than a lot of vocal talent or quality, as she was by far the worst vocalist from Fifth Harmony thanks to her breathy, chewy delivery and weak shrillness. Her debut album from 2018, Camila, was an exercise in amateurish production that provided more texture than her by-the-numbers forgettable material really deserved. And like J-Lo ahead of her, her popularity translating to success, it lives and dies on the hits. And when you look at her solo output, not a sterling record. Yeah, Señorita was massive this year, but let's be real. You swap out Camila for Becky G or Carol G, and doesn't the song immediately get kind of better? Maybe because the song right now is more reliant on brand and marketing and the video? Because when Camila's been required to carry hits by herself, well, Shameless was a flop because it was a flagrant attempt to co-opt the darker pop edge that's popular right now. And even with the benefit of the crossover Latin market, Liars kind of underperformed. So to see her that her label was dumping this album in early December, I mean, it's not like January like last time, but to me it screams that Epic and Psycho, the latter of which I should remind you is run by Simon Cowell, they're dumping a turd that doesn't even have a Havana for crossover, especially given the messy recording process that was Camila in 2018. They might be looking to just get this out the door. Not a good sign. But yeah, wasn't likely to be that good, but what do we get? Well, sadly, exactly what I was expecting. But what alarms me is the niggling feeling that this could have been better, with the fixes honestly pretty straightforward to cobble together something passable, albeit probably not great. And then you remember that Camila Cabello is signed to Psycho, and remember their reputation for bottom-of-the-barrel production, and then you might be left with the feeling that she's being set up to fail, but I'm not even sure it's that. To me, Romance screams of incompetence and mismanagement, where in the absence of true artist development, we've got a sophomore slump for an artist who really can't afford one, and I'll say it, not a good sign, because this album's not good. And you know what? There's no way around it. Camila Cabello is not a good singer. Beyond what I've already described, a lot of sloppy diction, a breathiness that becomes increasingly shrill and messy, and only barely on key at the best of times, I get the unnerving feeling that nobody's told her what vocal range best flatters her. Let's be blunt, you can be a bad or limited singer and still make good music. Look at Britney Spears or Selena Gomez. But if you don't understand your own limits or how to best express your presence on record in those limits, your good songs will slide towards mediocrity and your bad songs become excruciating. That's one reason why I brought up artist development, because vocal training and developing poise can help in this case, especially with the attempt at sultriness that seems to be Camila Cabello's default affectation. It's rare that she brings forward any sense of subtlety or languid texture or tightness or restraint, instead often over-singing or reaching into her somewhat pitiful falsetto that will then compromise any sort of vibe. The painful hooks on Living Proof, Bad Kind of Butterflies, and Dream of You kind of spring to mind with this. I'm also never really convinced of any chemistry that she's got with Shawn Mendes on Señorita, but in that affectation, it's about as good as it gets in that lane. It's not even that good. But it also highlights the open question surrounding what sort of singer she even wants to be, which impacts your vocal production or layering or even your choice of songs. And this album doesn't even seem to have any real clear direction. You'd think that'd be an easy worldwide crossover to throw in the generic reggaeton beat that might come close to matching her voice and attempted style, but the closest this album even gets is Liar thanks to the mariachi horns, and it still feels like a miss and an obvious layup. And then later on the album, we get cuts like This Love, which wants to be a retro soul song. And whoever thought Camila Cabello's limited voice could have handled that, they should have been fired from their job months ago. Although, knowing if they were probably at Psycho, they've been there for decades now. Of course, on a project with such obvious missteps, we might as well tackle the production, which is a disaster. The only songs that come close to being competently mixed are the final two ballads, where Billie Eilish's brother Phineas steps in as pretty much the only person who knows how to produce for a limited vocal range and register with any sense of subtlety and detailed production. Like the subtle Z-like clock he slides onto Used to This in order to amplify her nerves. It's a nice little touch there. But most of the rest of this album has been handed over to Louis Bell, arguably the most competent here, so much as he's gonna smother everything in reverb and auto-tune and maybe bring in Watt for a guitar solo. Then you have the also-ran production duos Matt Man and Robin in The Monsters and Strangers, and perennial annoyance for me, Frank Dukes. And I think at some point everyone realized that Camila Cabello's voice was not being coaxed or pushed in the right direction in the compositions, so instead they took the slapdash approach of washing out the mixes in auto-tune, overloading the percussion lines, and leaving whatever melody was left to suffocate and die. Can somebody tell me which of 3 different percussion grooves was working on Living Proof? Or why the electric guitars sound like absolute ass on Shoulda Said It and Cry For Me? Or why there's nothing really here that's allowed to sound really warm or organic to support her voice? More alarming, again, is the lack of direction beyond a lot of the bad production. Shameless sounds like a cheap imitation of Halsey trying to rip off Billie Eilish's darker atmosphere. Easy sounds like it was trying to be a Lover-era Taylor Swift song with bargain barrel mixing and mastering. And even if I think the bass line is not bad on My Oh My in a blatant attempt to recapture the success of Havana, DaBaby, he somehow has even less chemistry with her than Young Thug did on Havana. But what's more alarming is that as a whole, the album just sounds really cheaply produced, especially around Camila Cabello's vocals, which are rarely given any sort of desperately needed support or foundation before getting shoved right to the very front of the mix, with a lot of drum machine patterns sounding really stiff and clunky and overweight, and with an attempt to drown things out in smoky reverb to disguise a lot of bad choices in the melodies with no sonic direction. If I have to say anything positive, I don't know, I might actively dislike the vocal layering of Dream of You, but at least there's a competent tune beneath the hook, so it sticks out a bit more. And I guess the groove on Cry For Me, kinda decent. But now we gotta get to the lyrics, and I'll be blunt, there's not a lot here. Which is odd, because if Camila Cabello is trying to be sultry and romantic, the writing should be getting at least a little bit more steamy and interesting than this. Now, granted, the romantic chemistry we're relying on is with Shawn Mendes, so I'm not surprised it's kind of lukewarm, but your production and vocals, when they're this much of a mess, you need to have something better here. The most tension this album gets comes in some lingering feelings that she might have towards her ex before Mendes, which slipped through in some of the teasing of Shoulda Said It, and some of the questioning regret on Feel It Twice and Bad Kind of Butterflies, which the latter song, even she admits that was a little bit uncomfortable to revisit and record. So why it wasn't cut as easily the worst song on the album, I have no idea, because the vocal mixing's flat garbage. That being said, there are a couple decent lines and ideas here. Easy as a riff on Loeb's I Like Me Better, and I might actually tolerate this more. And I like how Cry For Me is a kiss-off that wants him to be worse off, or at least fake that he is. It might be petulant and melodramatic, but it's pop music. I can tolerate that. And look, I might not get the Shawn Mendes chemistry. It certainly isn't sold very well in the presence of DaBaby's explicit collaborative verse right before Senorita. That is questionable, but the obvious lyrical references on Dream of You and Used to This, they're cute enough. And well, for a while, I actually kind of like the more grounded detail that came on the conversational First Man. It's a nice closing song. Unfortunately, that song kind of faded on me when you realize it's directed at Camila Cabello's father, emphasizing how much he loved her first. And look, it's weird and backwards looking when guys write these sort of songs about their daughters. You get this all the time in country music, and Camila Cabello is not a good enough songwriter to not make this sound kinda off-putting. I get the intention, but not good execution. But as a whole, Okay, look, it's obvious I'm not a fan. The album's not made for me, I get it. But that doesn't mean I can't assess quality and when things go off the rails, which they did do here. The fact this album's promotion has floundered the way it has for an out-of-nowhere release in early December with no coherent instrumental direction and some of the most slapdash production I've heard in the mainstream this year. Even if I don't like Camila Cabello as a singer, the failures, they go beyond her here. And you might blame a lot of this on Psycho. Their track record's a mess, and it's not surprising to me, but the mismanagement of her career development is an astounding waste. This should be better than it is, and it does not bode well for her long-term career, especially given the rest of this album and any other singles they try to push. But as such, while I'm giving this a very light 4 out of 10 and I cannot recommend it, I really do hope her fans support her. She's on a label right now run by Simon Cowell, and after this, she might need all the help she can get. Just saying. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know, Camila Cabello fans, you didn't like my last review of this, but really, I kind of feel bad for her. Like, some of this, she's not a great singer. She's not even a good singer in my point of view. But the fact that her career has been mismanaged in this point in a lot of her music, which you can tell why her music's not the most important priority, but even still, this is not a good thing for her. And if she wants to have any sort of longevity, she needs to fix some things, and fast. Hell, the sooner she gets away from Psycho, the better. But you know what? If you want to support her now, links to buy and stream the albums down there below. I got the poll up there, but again, this is worrisome. I'll say it. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And hey, if you're looking for other album reviews or the newest episode of Billboard Breakdown, links in the card right over there. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.